when I was a student playing Magic the Gathering, I have to say. I have to confess that.
And I have to confess, even in my remote town of south of Spain, all my friends, all my group of friends, we were playing Magic cards.
So it was your friends, not you?
Me as well.
Okay.
Me with my group of friends all together in my high school.
It's quite popular here in Spain and all around the world. It's one of the greatest games. It's the greatest card games of all times, right? All the successful card games after Magic the Gathering were inspired on this game.
So we have the lead designer of the Magic cards.
We have I would say the most legendary designer of cards of Magic the Gathering, and also a magician himself. He's a magician.
Is he a magician himself?
Maybe he could do some tricks during the conversation.
Can you ask him?
Yeah, we can ask him to do. I'm going to save that for my last question. I'm going to ask him for a magic trick. And along with him, Min Kim, who is the former CEO of Nexon America and the co-founder of Bonfire Studios, along with our friend Rob Pardo, who is one of the major fans and experts in Magic the Gathering in the world, I would say.
Who best to interview Mark Rosewater than Min Kim?
This is going to be an epic conversation that I advise you not to miss. So let's say hello to them. They are in Seattle and Los Angeles. So hello, Mark, and hello, Min.
Thank you, Elena and Ivan. Thanks for having us. Today, we are going to talk about how Mark Rosewater has cultivated Magic the Gathering into a truly global and multi-generational game over the past 25 years. But before we get started, we just celebrated Juneteenth here in the US, and I thought it'd be really cool to show 3 awesome pieces of Magic the Gathering art. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about these characters?
Sure. Okay, well, this is Vivian Reed. She's a planeswalker. Her home plane is a place called Scala that was destroyed by one of our big villains, Nicole Bolas. So she's a planeswalker without a home. She has something called the arc bow. She's a hunter, and her bow, she can shoot arrows that summon spirit creatures that are from her home world. But obviously, she's the only one remaining of her home world, so they're just in spirit form. And she's a mono green mage. She hates civilization. She just appeared in a recent set of Korea, and she's a very fun character.
Cool. And the next one.
Oh, this is Kaya. So Kaya is a ghost assassin, which means she can kill ghosts. Her special power is that she can sort of phase through things and become insubstantial, and that allows her to actually interact with ghosts and be able to kill them. We first met her when she assassinated the king in Conspiracy Take the Crown, and she's shown up again in Ravnica and War of the Spark, and currently I think she's hunting Liliana. But she's once again, she's another fun character.
Awesome. And the last.
Teferi. Teferi has a long history. So he first appeared in a set called Mirage back in, 96, I believe. And he took part in that story, and then we went back in the past, and we got to meet him as a kid at school, at the Tolarian Academy. And we watched him slowly become the time mage that he is. His special magic is time magic. And then in Time Spiral, he helped save the multiverse, but he lost his spark, meaning he stopped being a planeswalker. And then we met him again recently in Dominaria, where he got his spark back. And now he's joined the Gatewatch, and he's around to do some really cool stuff. And awesome. The latest set, by the way, 21, he's the face of the latest set.
Yeah. Cool. So I thought maybe we could start by introducing ourselves. I'll go first. I know Ivan has said online that I'm Magic's biggest fan. That's absolutely not true. What is true that Magic the Gathering is one of my favorite things. And Mark, we just kind of met, so I don't think you know my history with Magic, but I've been saving this shirt for the last 15 years because when I first joined Nexon back in 2003, my only marketable skill was English. And they happened to be in a board game business at that time. And I used my English to help them to become a distributor of Magic. So this is the T-shirt that I got at the APAC conference in Cairns in Australia. I've been carrying this ever since. It's going house to house, and I'm like, I'm not going to throw this away. There's going to be a chance to use this. I also launched this game called Maple Story that was quite popular in North America, and I created this with Wizards of the Coast. And these cards are Magic the Gathering cards, but on the other side, they're not, because we created this game with Wizards, which was pretty cool at the time. I forget when this was. It was probably late 2000s. So that was pretty rad. And I found Magic the Gathering back in 1993 at a little store called the Adventurers Guild in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I was playing this game called Dungeons and Dragons, which everybody knows. And then this game called Magic the Gathering came and just literally took over the store. I'm guessing that that was a common story all across the US in game stores like that. So I've been in love with this game for a really long time. It's very special to me. And I'm so honored to be here to talk to you about the game that I really love and the game that you've been making for the last 25 years. With that, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Rosewater. I'm the head designer for Magic. So I too started back in 1993. I was working at a game store at the time. People kept coming in and asking about this game with on cards that you cast magical spells. So I tracked it down. I fell in love with it from the first time I saw it. In 1994, I started freelancing for Wizards of the Coast, and then in 1995, I started full time. So this October will be 25 years working on Magic, and I've loved every minute of it.
It's crazy. The game's going to be almost 30 years old. I don't know if there's another game kind of like that.
Great.
It's pretty nuts. Now you design. You're the head of Magic, so you design the cards, right?
No, I'm the head designer. I oversee. So Magic is sort of broken up into parts in the way we design it. Essentially, there's three major parts. There's what we call vision design, what we call set design, and what we call play design. I always use this house building metaphor when I talk about it. So vision design, we're the architects. We're making the blueprints. We're figuring out what the house is going to look like. But then we pass it to set design. They actually build the house. They actually make the set. Now they're using our blueprints to make it, but they make the set. And then play design is kind of like the interior decorators. They're making sure that everything about the house is as awesome as it can be. They do a lot of play balance and just a lot of adjusting to all the fine tuning that comes at the end. I'm in charge of the early part. I'm in charge of there's a blank piece of paper. What are we going to do? What's the set about? What are the mechanics? You know, I'm in charge of sort of and I have a whole team of people, but I mean, of what is the set? What's the vision of all the sets?
Got it. But there was a time when you used to design the cards, and you were also a prolific Magic artist, if I recall. What's that one?
We made a set way back in 1990, when was it, 96, I think, called Unglued, where it was a silver bordered set, not for tournament play. It was very humorous and comical. And I illustrated a card for that set called Look at Me on the DCI. The DCI was the people who would ban cards. And so it was a guy throwing darts at a dartboard. But anyway, we were going to have a child draw it. I said, we don't need a child. I draw like a child. And so I drew it. So that is my wonderful piece of art. I always claim that I'm the worst art who's ever been printed on a Magic card. So,
and you are on another Magic card as well, right? You have a card named after you as well.
We made a thing called Mystery Boosters. Oh, well, that card, yes. That card is named after. I did not illustrate the art. Stuart Griffin is a wonderful artist, did the art. What happened was we were in a meeting in, I think this is Mirage, and we had a hole, meaning we kicked a card out. And I designed this card, and I said, oh, I have a card I made. What do you think of this? And so when Bill Rose, who's now the VP of R&D, when he was in charge of the set, when he put in the file, he didn't know what to name it. So whenever he used to try to get me on an email, he learned the shortest amount of letters he needed to type to get that person's name. And for me, that was M-A-R-O. The first two letters of my first name, the first two letters of my last name. So he just wrote Maro on the card, more like Mark gave this to us. And the creative team said, oh, sounds good to us. And so they printed it on the card. Maro since become sort of my nickname online. And when people, I sign a lot of Maros because it's named after me. And I always, whenever I do it, I always draw on, and I draw different things on the face. So as you can see in that illustration.
Yeah, my game handle is generally Stove. It comes from Golden Stove, which is the translation of my Chinese characters for my name. And when I was working on MapleStory, the developers were like, "Hey, we're going to put you in the game," and I said, you can put me in later. But my lesson what I learned at that point was when someone says they're going to put you in the game, just get in the game because that chance is not going to come again. We are, yeah. So right now we're, coming off a strange global pandemic, so we can't be together in the same room. I thought it would be really cool if we kind of started by putting myself in your room. So that's going to be the background as we talk. And this is your Magic the Gathering art collection, right?
Right. This is literally the room I'm in right now. If I look up there, I can see so there's 4 pieces of art that I own. The far right is Maro. We just talked about that. I own the original Maro by Stuart Griffin. I own the art that I did on the left is looking at the DCI, along with the $1 check I got paid for it. Up above is Mize, done by up above is above you. That's by Matt Cavada. That was from Unhinged. There's a card in it called Mize. Matt gave me that as a present for my birthday, I think it was. And then Dan Frazier did Gesture Sombrero, which is the card on the bottom middle. And that was Gesture Sombrero was the art on the booster of Unglued. And then Mize ended up being on the booster of Unhinged. So anyway, I have 3 uncards because the unsets mean a lot to me, and Maro, the card that's named after me.
Awesome.
But yes,
so that was kind of a long lead up. Yeah, I mean, we're in the same room. We just have cameras facing the other way. So that was a bit of a long lead up, but I guess like the point of that was to kind of display that I'm a fan. And you have a history of connecting with fans. I think you do it in a way that most game developers don't. You're super connected to the community. Would love it if you could kind of tell us what your presence is and what your interactions are with fans.
Okay. Probably my biggest interaction with my fans is I have a blog on Tumblr called Blogatog. And people ask, when I make a daily comic called Tales of the Pit. And originally I started my blog just to put my comics someplace so people could see them. But there's a little button you could push that said, do you want to let people ask questions? And I said, okay, sure. So I clicked that button. And now it's like 8 years later, and I've answered 130,000 questions or something like that. So every day I answer questions. I answer a lot of questions. And that's the #1 way I interact with people. I'm also on Twitter, at Maro254. I'm on Instagram. I just started TikTok. My daughter got me on TikTok, so I've started posting some stuff on TikTok. Anyway, I'm as many places as I can be. I do a lot. I write articles. I do a podcast. I do a lot of outreach. And so I'd like to interact with the public wherever I can. Back in the day, I used to go to more events. Now I'm in my house. But back when I left my house, I would go to events and meet people in person. But anyway, I really believe one of the secrets of my success has been so much interaction with the public. Like, if you want to make the public happy, ask them what they want. They will tell you what they want.
Has any of that changed over the years? Like, where did you kind of discover the value of doing that? Was that kind of a natural thing? Because you started as a TV writer, right?
My background before I got here was, yes, I was a writer, a television writer. One of the things that happened very early on, before I even started working full-time when I was a freelancer, is I used to go on the Usenet. Back before there was... The Usenet's the precursor kind of to the World Wide Web, where it was kind of like a bulletin board. And I used to make puzzles for The Duelist, which was a magazine for Magic. And in the early days, before I even worked for Wizards, I would go on and I would talk with fans who were fans of the puzzle. And the way we used to do it is we'd make a puzzle and the next issue had the answers. So I would let people send me the answers and I would tell them whether they were right or not. And then I would chat with people. And I went on the Usenet a lot. So when I got hired, I continued to go on. And as things evolved, I went to whatever the latest thing was. but I always interacted with the public, even very early on. And I sort of became a spokesperson kind of just because I did it. It wasn't something anyone asked of me to do. But now I have, like I said, I have a lot of interaction. I do interviews. I do a lot of stuff online. So anyway, I really, really like interacting with the public. It's a lot of fun. Part of my job is I get to bring a lot of joy to people. So it's fun seeing that joy. Not that all the responses are joy, but I do get plenty of joy, and I like that.
That's great. I worked with a woman a long time ago who used to work at a design firm called IDEO in San Francisco. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but she really taught me the value of getting insights from your customers or your audience. Now you must get a ton of that through kind of your interaction with fans. But I think a lot of developers would probably see that as overwhelming. How do you navigate that? Like, how do you get the signal from the noise?
One of the things that I have always done, and just the nature of what I do, is I kind of jump in front of the fire hose of information. You need a thick skin. I mean, I won't say what I do doesn't come with, there's a cost that comes with this interaction online. And while there's lots of people that are very positive and sharing stories, there are a lot of people that are unhappy, and they also, I mean, more people aren't happy than unhappy, I guess I should say. But there's a lot of, if people have issues, they bring them to me. Some people are very polite about it. Some people are not very polite about it. So you need kind of a thick skin. Mostly what I've learned is everybody is trying to say something, and I want to figure out what they're trying to say. So even the most negative post, there's a point they're making. There's something that upset them. And you want to kind of get beyond. Sometimes, especially on the internet, they'll start by kind of attacking you, and then they'll say what they want to say. You got to get past that first part and look at what's the core of what they're trying to say. And what I like to think of is every single post, no matter what they're saying, no matter how happy or sad they are, or how angry they are, whatever emotion there's something in the seed of they're trying to say something. And usually what I learn is, this is what I enjoy about your game. Either make more of this or stop making this. I'd rather have that. And that's a lot of what's going on. I mean, one of the tricks about Magic is in many ways, the way as it works as a game, it's many different games to people. That there's many different ways to play it. There's many different formats. One of the things I always try to do is understand that not everybody's going to experience my game in the same way. And so one of the tricks of making the game is making sure that you're making something for all the different people. Now, Magic is a trading card game, which means you don't have to play with all the pieces. You pick the pieces you play with. So one of the tricks we've learned is, since we make so many pieces, we can make something for everybody by making these pieces for those people, these pieces for that people. And we try to really understand our audience, and then in everything we do, we try to make sure we're making individual things for different audiences. And it's tricky, but I think it's one of the big reasons of our success.
That's really cool. I mean, so, honing in on understanding your players, I read a bunch of your articles to prep for this, and I watched a lot of videos. And one of the quotes that I have here is, you said, "It's my job to make a game that players enjoy. To do that, I have to understand why players enjoy it. The quest is what led to the creation of player psychographics, which in turn have become a big tool used in R&D. I would love to talk about how that came about and how that impacts Magic the Gathering."
Sure. So my background is I studied communications in college. So although my major was in what they called broadcast and film at the time, which was like TV and film, the internet didn't exist yet. But we had to take classes in all the different types of communication. So I had to take a couple advertising classes. And in advertising, they do something they call psychographic, which is, we're selling a product. Who's our audience? Who are they? I mean, if I'm going to sell you something, I need to understand who you are and what you want. And so this idea of psychographics I thought was really interesting, which is, well, yeah, I get why advertising needs that, but why can't game design use that? So very early on, I came up with 3 psychographics. So I called them Johnny and Jenny, Timmy and Tammy, and Spike. And so the idea is, each of these want something from the game. That there's something about what makes them happy. So, for example, Johnny and Jenny are about expressing themselves. They want to, part of what makes the game so fun to them is they get to say, look at me, look what I can do. And a lot of the game for them is about that self-expression, is about sort of demonstrating something about themselves. Now, Timmy and Tammy, it's more of they're in it for the emotional feel, the visceral excitement. That whether it's having fun with friends or playing the biggest creature they can, you know, that they're in for, they want the experience. That they want to play the game and they experience something, and the fun of the game for them is having that experience. Spike is about proving themselves. Spike wants to say, look what I can do. And so Spike's very much about, Spike doesn't always need to win, but Spike is most thought about, you know, optimizing by saying, I can prove how good I'm at the game by watching me win, or maybe I have some goal I'm going to do and I'm going to be the best at that thing. I'm going to be the best person who knows story. I'm going to be the best person, you know. They want to really optimize their experience by showing what they're capable of in what they can do. Like Johnny and Jenny are showing who they are. Spike is showing what they're capable of. And each of these psychographics, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, are you basically designing for all three in every set? And what's kind of the balance between how you're designing for?
Well, basically the idea is when we design a card, I want to know who the end user is. Who do I think is going to play this card? And the reason the psychographic is so important is we can say to ourselves, oh, that's a Timmy Tammy card. You know, that we, like, for example, if we know the psychographic, we can lean into what makes them happy. And so really thinking about how your audience plays and what they want really helps you sort of lean in. If we say this is a Timmy Tammy card, oh, that means we can push things and make it a little, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a great tournament card, because that's not what they're into necessarily, but it needs to be something that's big and fun, or something that just evokes something out of them. And that by knowing the psychographic when we design, it allows us to say, oh, well, we're focusing in on who that is. Like every card I make, I want to understand who the card is for, and I want to optimize for that audience. Not everybody, that audience. Because if you try to make everything for everybody, I think you tend to fail in game design. You need to understand that your audience is going to pick and choose what they want, and make sure that you're giving enough things that each person can find what they want.
Yeah, and it feels like, you know, all three of these psychographics are basically interacting with each other in the community. So if you cater to one and then you lose another, you're kind of losing that social fabric, I think. Like when I worked on MapleStory back in the 2000s, we had psychographics, but I don't think we knew we had them. I wish we understood this concept, because we had the spikes, but we also had the people that just like to play for maybe the Timmies for the experience. And we understood the spikes because we could see the data, and we ended up designing the game more and more for the spikes, and then losing more and more of, I guess you would call, the Timmies and the Tammies. And overall, it just kind of really hurt the community. And I know the game's really come back since then, but at that point, I think we over-catered to one side, and we lost a huge portion of our audience, which kind of broke the fabric of this community of the game.
Yeah, one of the things about Magic is a giant community. I mean, one of the things I love about Magic is it is as much a lifestyle as it is a game, in the sense that when you open up a pack of Magic, it's not just the 15 cards you're getting. You're getting a whole tournament series. You're getting all this story. You're getting all these people that you can go in line and interact with. And so one of the things that we carry a lot of burden on our end in making the game is making sure that we can help that community and build that community and foster that community. And so, like, for example, when we do previews, it's not just us previewing. We spread the cards out and let a lot of our community preview, because we want to create those bonds wherever we can, because we really respect and admire our community.
Yeah, the community is huge, but Magic's now been around for 30 years, and that community has really been fed. Like, how much Magic is really out there in the world?
Well, I mean,
how many cards, how many sets?
Let's see if I have the top of my head. I know that we hit 20,000 cards a couple years back. So my guess is we're 23, 24,000, somewhere around there is my guess.
Are those unique cards?
What? Unique cards.
Are they unique cards? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think between 23 and 24,000 unique cards. It's over 20,000, and that was a couple years ago. So we have a lot of unique cards. Like I said, we're coming up on the 100th expansion, I believe. And then we have lots and lots of supplemental sets beyond just the main sets we make. And we're in 11 languages. I think we're played in something like 140 countries. I mean, we're everywhere, you know. And so, I mean, it's the scope of Magic. I mean, things that's really hard to understand is Not a lot of games are around 27 years later. There's not a lot of games. Like, I've been working on the same game for 25 years. I don't know how many people in the world can say that. You know what I'm saying? Because there's not that many games that have lasted 25 years, let alone one person working on them.
It does sound like maybe a Guinness record there. I know Wizards has a couple of Guinness records.
I work with a guy named Bill Rose, who's our VP, and Bill and I started the same month. So Bill and I share. We've worked for 25 years, but yeah, we might be the only ones that have done that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
well, let's jump. That's a lot of magic. Let's jump into a little bit about how these magic sets get designed. You touched a little bit about it when we first started talking, but how does a magic set get designed?
Well, the process of making a magic set these days is really about 2.5 to 3 years long. So it starts with a team, myself, my direct boss, Aaron Forsyth. We work with a creative team, and we have to figure out what sets we want to make. We sit in a room, and we usually make sets a year at a time. I mean, the ideas of the sets. We're not building the sets, but coming up with what the general idea is. And then we do some testing, and we work out what we want to do. And then once we get buy-off on that, then we start what's called exploratory design that I oversee. And exploratory design, if I'm using my house metaphor, before we even get to the blueprints, we have to do a lot of testing. Let's look at houses. Let's look at places to build the house. And so we do exploratory design for 2 to 3 months, and we sort of, what I say is we go wide but shallow, which is we explore a lot of different areas to understand, okay, assuming we're making, let's say, for example, we just did Ikoria, which was Monster World. Okay, we're doing Monster World. What does that mean? What do people expect? What are the tropes people associated with it? What are the TV shows and the movies and what are all the things people have done that interact with the place we're playing with? Then we pass it to vision design. Vision design is usually 4 months. That is us making the vision, making the blueprint of what the set is. Usually we'll make the mechanics. So in Ikoria's case, we made the mechanics in the set. And we made Mutate and Companion. We brought back what's it said? It's cycling. And we sort of made the framework for what we wanted. So then we pass off the set to set design. Set design is a little over a year, I believe. They're building the set. They take our vision. They take our mechanics usually. We'll design cards as proof of concept early on. So Vision will hand off a full file of cards. Some of those cards get used, not all of them. Some of them will be improved upon. Some will be thrown away and replaced by other stuff. And then near the end of set design, I think it's for 3 to 4 months, it overlaps with set design, or overlaps with part of set design. Play design comes in. At that point, they're working with the set. They're doing a lot of play testing. They're fine-tuning costs. They're figuring out where the fun is, so they know where to push and where not to push. And this is all.
Sorry. And this is all with a very small team, right? Like, what's the team behind the magic?
It's not that small a team. Our R&D, which is the larger team we call Studio X, is like 130 people, I think. I mean, it's a lot of people. Okay. Now, given those, like for example, we finish the set. Now editing has to edit it. Then it has to go to layout. Then we have to make graphic design, packaging, and and then there's once we get out of our part, then there's marketing and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's a long journey. Like from when we sit in the room and go, hey, how about Monster World, to somebody opening up Ikoria, is usually at least 3 years. Sometimes
right. So it's kind of moving down the queue, and as soon as you're done, you're kind of working on the next one because you're on the front end of the process, right? Because you're in the vision design.
Let me give you an idea of how much I work on. So our sets right now are code-named after sports, and they're alphabetically. So, for example, Ikoria that just came out was Cricket. That was his code name. So the fall set, Zendikar Rising, was known as Diving. So that's not out yet. So there's diving, equestrian, fencing, golf, hockey, ice skating, judo, kayaking, and I'm starting exploratory on lacrosse right now.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
That's right now for us.
All right.
And that's not core sets. That's not supplemental sets. That's just main premier sets.
So, I mean, you're working on a lot of different stuff. The game's been designed now for 30 years. You've been working on it for 25 years. What's the hardest part of designing Magic?
I mean, there's a lot of things that are tough. I think the thing that's the hardest for me in my job is it's what I call rolling the boulder up the hill, which is my job is to say to everybody else, hey, I know we've never done thing X, but we should do thing X. And Magic's done a lot of stuff. If I say let's redo something, especially something that's successful, it's very easy to get all my fellow coworkers to go, that sounds great, let's do that. But when I pitch something we've never done before, I get resistance. Not that I shouldn't get resistance. I mean, the whole point of having fellow workers is to test any idea that I have. But there are a lot of things. For example, we'll take Throne of Eldraine, which was a set that came out this fall. I've been wanting to do a fairy tale set for about 10 years. Like, I came up with the idea 10 years ago, and I pitched it, and pitched it, and pitched it, and, like, I just had to not give up. Like, I had to believe in the idea. The set was based on the idea of a top-down fairy tale world. And I pitched it, and I mean, I just had to find the right place for it, and that took a lot of time. And I'm rolling a lot of boulders up a lot of hills consecutively because, as we talked about, there's so many sets. So it's tiring rolling the boulder up the hill. I mean, in the end, when I get it and I make it, I'm very happy. And I know it's part of the process. But sometimes you're in the middle of rolling the boulder and the boulder's rolled down the hill a couple times. That can be very...
Well, and like it looks like sometimes you're rolling the boulder up the hill, but there's also places that you revisit too, right? So like, how do you make the decision to roll a new boulder up the hill versus, let's take Zendikar, for example, we're going back next year. I think it's the third time we're going there, right? So like, how do you make the decision on when to go back? Oh, this year, yeah. And what are the challenges for building or going back to a place?
So one of the general rules is we try to about half the time go to new worlds and about half the time revisit old worlds. We spend a lot of time and energy building really fascinating, exciting worlds. The players enjoy them, so we like to go back from time to time. We leave a little bit of space so people are excited when we return. The trick to a return is you want to capture what people loved about it the first time or the previous times we've been there, but you also want to make sure there's something new about it, that we don't want to just rehash exactly what we did before. So the trick is sort of, how do you find, like, what's the best part of the world? What do people expect the world to be? You want to deliver on expectations, and then at the same time, you want to sort of give something new that they don't expect. And there's that mix. So like, I don't know, Zendikar Rising is a little far out, but like, it's a set that has a nice mix of things you know and things you don't know, sort of mixed together. And the things you know are things you love about Zendikar as a set, as a world. And the things you don't know are things that make sense in Zendikar that I think you'd be happy. It feels like it belongs, but it's something that is new, so it's something new to experience.
Right. Now, this all sounds really great, but you're also under the clock, right? There's a physical aspect to Magic that it always has to ship. It's almost kind of like a newspaper. What is that like?
Well, yeah. So in 27 years, Magic's never missed its deadline. You know what I'm saying? We always come out when we say we're going to come out. I mean, I guess the coronavirus did delay us a little bit in certain parts of the world. But barring pandemics, Magic comes out when we say it's going to come out. So yeah, it's on a schedule. When I say I have 4 months to do vision design, I don't have 5 months. I don't have 4.5 months. I got 4 months. That's how much time I have. And then I'm going to pass it off. And so, one of the advantages of doing something for 27 years is you get good at it. We understand our processes, and all along the line, and not just even in R&D, all the people beyond me that have to physically make the cards and print the cards and ship the cards. We have a very fine-tuned system, and that comes from just doing the same thing again and again and again and iterating and making it better and making it better. And I feel that R&D has gotten better at how we make the game, and the rest of the company's gotten better at all the aspects of printing, of shipping, of you name it, all the aspects that go into making the game.
Cool. Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about one of the sets that you just touched on, which is Throne of Eldraine. It's one of the most recent sets, and I know you were really passionate about it, and this was one of those boulders that you had to push up. Why was it so hard to get this pushed? Where did the inspirations come from? What made this set cool?
And so we originally had gone to a world called Lorwyn, which was take on Celtic mythology, and it wasn't really fairy tales, at least not sort of Eastern European, like a lot of when people think of fairy tales, like stuff like Disney did, sort of stuff based in Germany and France and Italy, and I realized when I saw Lorwyn that was something like we kind of didn't quite do fairy tales. We kind of nipped around the edges, and it made me realize it would be fun to do a fairy tale set. And then we did a set called Innistrad, which was a top-down gothic horror set, where we really said, we're going to make gothic horror a world, and then built the set top-down from the gothic horror. And it went really well. The fans loved it. And then it made me realize that we could make a really cool, I thought, fairy tale top-down set, because fairy tales are based in fantasy. The thing that really motivated me was I heard the statistic that said the average American, when they died, will have seen 10 movies with the plot of Cinderella. And that really hit home. I'm like, that these are stories that are so ingrained, and really they're elements that people understand that go back, centuries. And so it was something I really wanted to do. So the trick of me succeeding was interesting was, there was another designer, a guy named Sean Main, that came up with this idea for a Camelot set. And the idea was, it was, general fantasy, but sort of building around the idea of knights, and just using a lot of the Arthurian legend and stuff as inspiration. And so I went to my boss, Aaron Forsyth, and I said to him, hey, I love the idea of the set, but I don't think there's enough there. But you know what would complement it perfectly? How about fairy tales? Because fairy tales, they're princes and princesses. That's staple in kings and queens. That's staple of fairy tales. And so I said, hey, all the stuff that we need to do to build a world that makes Arthurian legend work will make fairy tales work. In fact, I argued that Arthurian legend, in some ways, are just kind of English fairy tales. And so anyway, I convinced the powers that be. And then when I got the set, I think everybody thought that it was going to be mostly Arthurian with a little bit of fairy tales. And I in my vision, I'm like, maybe we can do more fairy tales. And by the time we handed it over, what we realized was, not that the Arthurian legend wasn't fun, and we did a lot of cool stuff with it, but magic does knights all the time. If I said, hey, we're doing a magic set with knights, you're like, again? But if I say we're doing fairy tales, ooh, we've never done that. So the fairy tales took the focus, because that was the new thing. And that we did knights really cool, we did Camelot really cool, and all that was in the set. But that was kind of more the cake, I think, and the icing metaphor. I like my metaphors. The icing was kind of the fairy tales, which was kind of the thing that attracted people. That was the sweet part of the set.
So people kind of understand it based on, I think you've talked about this before, piggybacking. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's like, because people understand these things when they play the set, it kind of makes resonance, or have people understand it a little bit easier. But when I think of kind of all the things that you talk about, like, because I grew up in New York, I have a lot of memories that come to me. And so I have expectations of what I think the set is going to be. What I found really cool about what I saw in Eldraine was, there was some of that stuff. But then there were things that I have not seen before. So this is, obviously evocative of Red Riding Hood, which is really cool. But then I saw this, I think it's called the Stormfist Crusader. And I also saw Oko. And these are images that I actually wouldn't have thought of if you initially gave kind of those inputs. So how did they come about? How does Magic bring these types of characters into the game and then make it all kind of come together?
Well, when we do a set, especially like a top-down set, it's not that, for example, we do fairy tales. It wasn't us just doing fairy tales. It was us doing Magic's take on it. That what we wanted, for example, we had this neat sort of Camelot fairy tale inspired world, and we said, how can we bring it to Magic? So, for example, one of the secret sauce of Magic is what we call the color wheel. Magic has 5 colors. The colors have this identity. They have this ethos. They connect to each other in a cool way. So whenever we're doing a set, we sort of say, how can we take Magic, and usually it's the color pie, and infuse it. So, for example, in Throne of Eldraine, we made 5 courts, and each court represented the essence of one of the colors. And so there were knights, and there's all the stuff that was built around each of the 5 colors. And so we're not just making fairy tales or Arthurian legend as you know it. It's our take on it. It's our magic-inspired world that uses that as a jumping-off point. And you talked about resonance and piggybacking. Let me talk about that for a second. One of the things I learned very early on was I want to make my audience happy. How do I do that? Well, one of the ways I can do that is every player secretly, or not secretly, but every player, there's things they've experienced in life that has made them happy, that other people and other things have helped make them happy. And as a game designer, I can tap into the fact that they have pre-existing relationships with things, that they have emotional connections to other things. And what resonance really is saying, hey, you have that love for this thing. I'm going to connect that now to a magic card. Like we just made a set called Core 2021, which is, we do a core set every year. And in it, we had a little mini dog theme, for example. And all these people wrote to me all excited because they're like, oh, I love dogs. Or you're talking about Throne of Eldraine. Oh, I love fairy tales. Or, I love gothic horror. I mean, we keep shifting around what we do. But the idea is that we'll take the dogs in Core 2021 or the fairy tales. I didn't make someone fall in love with dogs. I didn't make someone fall in love with fairy tales. I didn't do that. But as a designer, I can tap into that and bring that joy to our game. That I can say, oh, you love dogs? Let's bring dogs to our game. Oh, you love fairy tales? Let's bring fairy tales to our game. And that a lot of resonance, the idea is building and creating things that really allow the audience to share their love of something with your game. And the idea of piggybacking is the idea that you can make rules and make things that build off what your audience already knows. A reoccurring theme you'll see in a lot of stuff I'm talking about is that if you want to make your audience happy, you have to understand your audience, and you have to give your audience things that help them, that make them happy and let them do things. Whether it's making them psychologically happy because you understand why they want to play things, or makes them viscerally happy because you're connecting with things they love, or the surprise. We can take things but present it in a way you don't know, and that is fun. It's fun seeing our take on Little Red Riding Hood, our take on Goldilocks, where we're really taking it, and our Goldilocks is a bear hunter. That's not the Goldilocks but it really is a fun twist on it, and that's the thing we get to do. That and when we went to Gothic Horror World, we got to do our spin on what zombies are and what vampires are. Every time we do something, we get to do that. And that as a game designer, what I want to do, my quote that you read aloud is, I want to make my audience happy. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is, what are the tricks? What are the things you can do? What are the tools you have at your disposal so that you, the game designer, can bring that to the audience so that they can enjoy what you're giving them.
I love that you said that. Is like our job is to make the audience happy. I read your, we're going to get into this. I read your article, Why Diversity Matters in Game Design. I really enjoyed it. If people haven't read it, I highly recommend you go read that. And I'll give you a little story about myself. Growing up in New Jersey, my parents used to go on summer vacations to Atlantic City. And we would go on these road trips, and I would drive down and we would stop at rest areas, and I would have my Roy Rogers fried chicken, super happy. And then I would go to the gift shop. And I remember this because every year I'm like looking at these license plates, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to find Min in here one of these days. And I would go down the M's, and I'm like, oh, I don't see it here. Maybe they have Kim. Maybe that there's a girl named Kim and I can take that one. And then I would go down and I'm like, Kimberly, I can't use that one. And every year when we go down to vacation, I'm like, maybe this year they'll have it. And I was a young kid. They never did. But I do think that that's probably also the journey of a lot of people playing games as well, is that they want to kind of see themselves. And I think that's part of the piggybacking or resonance that you were talking about, is finding that, right? Like finding the characters that kind of feel like them. And I think that's really cool. So I'd love to kind of go and talk about that article because I feel like Magic's been really ahead of our industry in representation.
Well, one of the things, first of all, I talked about how we have over 20,000 cards, right? We have a lot of cards. So we have a lot of opportunity to let people have things that are their own. And one thing we've always believed really strongly in is that one of the things, we want to make you happy, right? And one of the things that brings great joy to people is seeing themselves in the things they love. And I have a place where people can write to me. I also have an email people write to me as well. So I get a lot of feedback from people where people can share what they're thinking. And whenever we go out and we introduce new things and have new worlds and let people see different kinds of things, that when we make something that is them, that they get it recognized, that is something that connects to, it is so strong. And I get all these letters, and I think people that have always seen themselves in the things they love don't understand the people that haven't had that experience. As you shared, for example, you want to find your name on the thing. And, my name was Mark. I never had that problem. Every time I ever looked, Mark was there. Because I grew up in a society where somehow Mark was a name that got to be on that license plate. And that I didn't have that experience, you know what I'm saying? And I would turn on TV, or I would, watch a movie. I saw myself all the time. So I think when you're used to seeing yourself all the time, you don't understand what it means when you don't. And one of the things that's really interesting, if you just watch culturally, like, I'm a big superhero fan. And it was really interesting watching the reaction to both Black Panther and Wonder Woman. And in each case, there was an audience going, oh, finally, a superhero movie for me. I can see myself in a superhero movie. I don't get to see that very often. And each one was really well received because there's a segment of the audience going, they could embrace it as something that was theirs. And so, look, we're making a lot of cards. I keep saying that I want the audience to connect. Look, it's just, of course, we want to make sure that as much as we can, and one of the things we do in all the different worlds is we make sure that each world is diverse. We don't go to a world and say, well, everybody on this world looks identical. We don't do that. We want to make sure that there's diversity within the worlds itself. And this is a big initiative. It's been an initiative for a long time. It's something we care a lot about. That's why I wrote a whole article about it. I did a podcast on it. I really think that, two things. One, I think it's just good for game design. I think that having diversity will just make more people want to buy your game. I think just from a bottom line financial, it's good for the game. And morally, it's just good. It's just good to be inclusive and involve more people. You know what I'm saying? That I think it is, it's a great opportunity where I think it's good for business, and I think it's just good for us as people. I think that they actually interconnect. And I always will say to game designers that, look, you want to have the broadest audience you can. You want as many people as possible to want to come to your game. And there's many ways to do this, but a really important one that I don't know that everybody thinks about, hopefully more people are thinking now, but not everybody thinks about, is, hey, you want your audience to feel welcome. You want your audience to feel connected. And there's no greater way than doing that than being a mirror to your audience so they can see themselves.
I'll show you this. As I was thinking about our conversation today, my daughter walked by while I was in my arena screen, and I kind of started showing her the different characters, and she's like, I had to do her hair. And I got Tamio here, and she's got her hair, and she was pretty excited about that. So I think that was the moment where you got another Magic the Gathering fan, was that she was able to see herself in the game, which I thought was super cool. All right, so let's see. I think we pretty much hit all the things. I think we did a great job there. Is there anything else you want to say? I know I watched this talk that you did, 20 lessons in 20 years. It's been 5 years since. Yeah. Have there been any new lessons that you want to close us out with?
I'll share one new lesson. So I've learned many lessons, but we don't have a lot of time. So one new lesson. So my new lesson is ideas are overrated. Execution is underrated. And what I'd say is, in the culture that we live in, especially like in the game design world, and in any creative world, I think that there's a lot of, there's this fantasy about the artists that they come up with an idea, they get hit by a lightning bolt of idea, and then, aha, they have the idea. And so much energy is spent on that moment, on the, haha, I got an idea. And I think people really overvaluate that. Not that ideas aren't important, not that ideas don't matter, but I think we sort of, we put a little bit too much importance on the excitement of the idea generation. And the reality is, an idea that's not executed well is garbage. It's meaningless. It doesn't matter. And that good ideas are wonderful things. I'm not anti-good ideas. But I think we as a community spend too much time sort of putting them on ideas on a pedestal. And what we don't realize is really what makes ideas shine is all the hard work we put into how we execute them. And that so much of my job, like, yeah, the idea generation is a tiny portion. The making the ideas happen, the execution of the ideas really is what really brings it to life and makes it shine. And that, I think, if we focus a little less on caring about ideas and a little more caring about execution, I think I would like us to value execution more. That I think that,
Do you think,
yeah.
has one of your lessons been that you can take a mediocre idea and execution can turn it into a great one?
I think that you get a better product with a mediocre idea and amazing execution than you do with amazing idea and mediocre execution.
Got it.
I've watched so many times of taking an idea and that the execution of it really finds the way to bring it to life. A lot of my job is I come up with an idea and then I go, okay, how do I and my team make that a reality? And there's so much work and energy that goes into that. And I think what happens is, I think if you don't, as people that make something, if you don't really say that the art of making something is important, I think a lot of people get lost in the execution and they feel like bad about it because they're like, well, I got the great idea. Why isn't it happening? And they don't realize the amount of work the execution takes. And this lesson to me was really saying that, well, yes, ideas are lovely. I want to raise up the idea of the value of execution and the importance of execution, because it really is in the execution that things become wonderful.
Awesome. So I have a mediocre idea. My gamer tag is Golden Stove. Do you think that you can put that in the game with some kind of amazing execution? You don't have to answer that. No, but today was awesome, Mark. Like, it's really been an honor talking with you. I think I learned a lot of great things, and I can't wait to bring it back to my studio, Bonfire Studios. And I'm hoping other developers can learn from this as well as they kind of embark on their adventure of creating a game that hopefully lasts for generations as well. Thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I?
Yes. Go ahead, Mark.
So we were talking a lot about, I did a podcast at GDC called 20 Years, 20 Lessons. You can watch on YouTube. I read a weekly column called Making Magic, where I talk about design. If you want to learn about the makings of design, I do a podcast every week called Drive to Work. And my podcast is on Tumblr called Blogatog. I talk about design constantly. If you are a game designer, you want to learn more, I have written millions of words on this topic, and between talking and writing, I produce millions of words. So if you want to hear more, or if anything I said today inspired you, there's a well of information that you can dive into if you want to hear more of stuff that I have. I have a lot of stuff online. You can spend days and days and days, maybe probably weeks and weeks, going through all my stuff.
And you know, thank you so much, Mark and Kim. You know, we just got one question from one of those fans that go constantly on your content, that play your game. And I wanted to bring up this really quick question for you, Mark, because he's someone that you might not know, but is very well known here in Spain. He's called Freaky Doctor. If you are watching the El Hormiguero in Spain, you know exactly who he is, the script writer and also participant in El Hormiguero, and a great Magic the Gathering fan. And he just wrote us and said, could you please make this little question to Mark? And I say, oh, of course, Doctor. And he says, are you not worried, Mark, that with increasingly complex game dynamics, it will be difficult for new players to integrate? So I guess what he's saying, he told me a couple of times, is what happens with the newcomers? I mean, more and more people could be entering the game. Are you just, you feel that the complexity is growing and the people is getting a little bit more difficult to get in the game, or it's not like that?
Well, so we call that barrier to entry, and for people who read my stuff, I say all the time that one of Magic's biggest issues is barrier to entry. We're a 27-year-old game. We've made over 20,000 cards, over almost 100 sets, and we produce a lot of material, and that is very intimidating for a beginner. The good news is we have a thing called Magic the Gathering Arena, which is online and has a really good tutorial. It has a non-judgmental computer that will teach you and not judge you at all. And it's a really good way to learn magic. The other great way to learn magic is finding somebody who knows magic. Having somebody teach you that really is passionate and can take the time to teach you. We've learned those are the two best ways to get people in. We keep making magic. Part of what makes magic magic is we don't stop. We keep making new things. And yes, a newcomer will always have the problem of there's a lot of stuff we've made, but we've made a lot of paths to help those new players into the game. And so I really recommend either Magic the Gathering Arena, or if you know somebody who plays Magic who wants to teach you, those are the two best ways to learn, because both ways will hold your hand and will go slowly with you and teach you.
I totally agree with you, because the arena itself helped me a lot, and I'm a big fan now. I mean, it's an amazing game, and we are so proud and so honored to have you here. And Min, you are the best possible counterpart for Mark for this kind of conversation. It's been amazing the way you drive the conversation with so much energy as Mark has. We are so happy to have you both here, and thank you so much for taking the time for doing this for Gamelab Live 2020. Hopefully, we can play some Magic together here in Barcelona sometime soon.
Well, thanks for
you so
having me.
much.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. That was
See you
super fun.
soon.
Take care, man.
Bye, guys.
Bye.